G'day gymnastic skill seekers. Today I want to talk all about elbow pain. So last week I posted a post about shoulder pain and how to fix and prevent shoulder pain, specifically more in pressing movements. And there was a comment left about, can I do a video on elbow pain? So here we go. That's what I'm going to talk about. Now, elbow pain is a pretty common injury in calisthenics work or gymnastics work. And there are a number of reasons why we end up feeling elbow pain. The first thing I want to say is do not work through pain. So if a particular movement, let's say it's the push-up, is causing you pain and you can't do full range of motion push-ups, then you shouldn't be doing the push-up. You need to stop doing the push-up and find alternative movements that you can do while you fix the elbow pain. Continuing to try to push through pain is only going to make things worse, and it's going to slow down the recovery process. It could lead to a more permanent injury. So back off on anything that's causing pain is the first thing I want to say. The next thing I want to talk about is like our movement quality and the technique of our movement. All right. So if you're not doing full range of motion push-ups, chin-ups, locking out those elbows in your handstands, locking out those elbows in your planche work, or whatever you're working on, making sure that the technique and the quality of the movement is high, then the chances of elbow pain is going to increase. We want to be working full range of motion. We want the ability to be able to lock out the arm, lock out the elbow in different positions. So if you know that your elbows are bending when you're trying to do planche or you're trying to do handstands, that's a problem that you need to isolate and you need to solve, because it's going to lead to elbow pain in the future. And I'll talk more about that further in the post. With our bent arm movements, with our chin-ups, with our rows, with our dips, with our push-ups, with our handstand push-ups, with all of our bent arm movement, we want to make sure we're loading the shoulders first before we load the elbow. So an example of that could be in a chin-up. If I'm in a dead hang and the shoulders are elevated, I want to be able to depress and slightly retract the shoulders before I bend the elbow. This allows me to load the lats and the big muscles of the back before I load the bicep or the elbow joint, okay? So it puts more force into the shoulder and less force into my elbow. If I bend the elbow first, I load the bicep and I load the elbow before I load the big muscles. And it's much harder to load the shoulder if the bicep already has tension in it. The bicep is pulling the shoulder out of position. I have my whole body weight sitting on my bicep, makes it hard for me to get the shoulder back and down. If the bicep is relaxed and I set the shoulder, then it's much easier for me to load the shoulder than it is to load the elbow. So we want to be careful of the technique. I do the same in rows. If you watch any of my row videos, I talk about retracting and depressing the shoulder before we bend the elbow. Same with dips, same with handstand push-ups. We lean the shoulder forward first before we bend the elbow. This helps us to not put as much force into the elbow joint, and it helps us perform the movement with better technique, and it decreases the chance of pain and injury. So technique matters. Quality movements matter. If you're doing high volumes of shitty movements, that's going to increase the chance of injury and pain. Okay, moving on a little bit more, I want to talk about the elbow joint. Now, the elbow joint is not a very mobile joint. What do I mean by that? It's more of a stability joint, okay? So the elbow is located between the shoulder and the wrist. The elbow is good at flexion and extension. It's got a small bit of rotation in there, but not very much. But the elbow is designed to flex and extend, okay? Let's go below the elbow to the next joint. The next joint is the wrist below the elbow. Now, the wrist can extend, it can flex, it's got radial and ulnar flexion, it's got rotation. It's a very mobile joint, the wrist. We go above the elbow joint. We have shoulder. It's got flexion, it's got extension, it's got abduction, it's got adduction, it's got rotation. It's a very mobile joint, okay? So we've got a mobile joint, a stability joint, and a mobile joint. Now, if we lack wrist mobility, if we lack wrist extension, then we have trouble being able to straighten our elbow above our head. This puts more force into the elbow. If I can lock the elbow, I'm sitting on the skeletal system, okay? If the elbow's bent, I'm sitting on the muscular system. which is pulling on the connective tissue around the elbow. So in movements like handstands, I need to have good wrist extension, and I need to be able to lock the elbow joint so that I'm not putting additional force into the connective tissue and the muscles of the elbow. So I need to make sure I've got good wrist flexibility, okay? We also need the same with the shoulder. If I don't have good shoulder flexion, then chances are, again in the handstand, I'm not going to be able to straighten the elbow, okay? If I don't have good shoulder extension in push-ups and dips, well then chances are I'm going to put, again, more force into the elbow. Can I lock out my elbows at the top of the dip? Do I lock out my elbows at the top of the push-up or in the planche movement? Am I lacking some sort of shoulder flexibility or range of motion in the shoulder that's causing me to put more force into the elbow joint, which is a stability joint, okay? So these are things that we have to think about. Am I lacking flexibility in the wrist or the shoulder? And is that causing me to put more load into the elbow, which is leading to the injury or leading to pain? The body is a remarkable thing. It adapts. It works around our limitations. If I'm missing flexibility in the shoulder, then I'm going to try to make up that flexibility in the next joint below the shoulder. If I'm missing flexibility in the wrist, I'm going to try to make up that mobility in the joint above the wrist, in the elbow again. So the body tries to adapt. It does its best to work around the limitations in one joint, but then it puts more force or more pressure on the next joint in the chain. So we've got to be careful of that and think about not only the elbow, or the pain is here, that's the symptom, but what could the cause of that pain be? We've got to look up the chain and down the chain, okay? So don't just think I need to be working more on my elbow joint with more curls and more extensions. That's not necessarily going to solve the problem here. If anything, it could make the problem worse. Besides the flexibility, we also need to think about the stability of the shoulder. In last week's post, I talked about fixing shoulder pain. You might feel shoulder pain in pressing movements. What is it? How do we fix it? We talked about the stability of the shoulder. Now, if you've got an unstable shoulder, think about that shoulder moving around a little bit. Well, again, that's going to place more force into the elbow joint. If the shoulders are not stable and strong, I'm not pushing from a good, or pulling from a good base of support, then again, more pressure, more force into the elbow. I'm always working shoulder external rotation work, trap 2 and trap 3 stuff with all of my online clients and in all the programs that I write, because we want strong and stable shoulders. This base of support allows us to produce force. If the shoulder is unstable, our ability to produce force is limited, okay? So that's a key component. You've got to maintain all of the shoulder stability work in every training phase that you do. All right. If you haven't seen that video, go back and check it out. It will give you some ideas of what you need to do to increase your shoulder stability. Moving on from stability, we want to talk about the structural balance of the muscles around the elbow joint. So I like to sometimes think about a joint like a pulley system, and the muscles coming into that pulley system are like the connections, the ropes that go into that pulley system. So I've got the bicep muscle coming in here, and the opposite of that is the tricep. So there's like this pulley system that works here. So if I do a lot of bicep work, I'm always training chin-ups and bicep curls, then I'm really strengthening the elbow flexors. But can I straighten my arm? If I can't extend the elbow to lock the elbow, then my tricep is not as strong as my bicep. So I want to make sure I'm balancing those muscles. If I'm doing a lot of pressing work, we have a lot of hand balances, a lot of people always pressing and doing a lot of handstands, strengthening out the tricep and the pressing muscles, but they don't do a lot of bicep work. So they can end up with elbow pain or shoulder pain because, again, they've got an imbalance there between those muscles. So we want to be thinking about, well, how many bent arm bicep curl exercises am I doing in my training? How many bent arm tricep exercises am I doing? How many straight arm bicep exercises? We're talking our front levers. We're talking skin the cat. We're talking all of those straight arm pulling movements compared to straight arm pressing, the planche movements, the handstand movements. And are we getting some balance in there? Making sure I'm balancing out the pressing and the pulling exercises. If not, then maybe I'm going to create this sort of structural imbalance between the bicep and the tricep, putting that pulley system out of alignment, putting the elbow joint out of alignment, which can cause pain in the elbow joint. So balance here is what we're after. We can also look below the joint. So we think about the muscles of the forearm. Now, we've got obviously wrist flexion and wrist extension using different muscles of the forearm. We have radial and ulnar flexion using different muscles of the forearm. Our gripping strength, our false grip, all these different things train the muscles of the forearm. If I'm consistently doing a lot of false grip training, I'm good at training all of the wrist flexors, but what about the wrist extensors? And they come across the elbow joint as well. So am I training them? Vice versa, if I'm doing a lot of handstands and a lot of planche work with hands on the floor, then I'm working a lot again on the wrist flexors. That's the muscle that I'm using to push into the ground. But what about strengthening the wrist extensors? We can think reverse curls in that position and working on some of that stuff. If we're using the P-bars all the time, we're always in this neutral grip. Great for ulnar and radial flexion, but what about our normal flexion and extension this way? If I'm not hitting that, well then again, I'm getting this imbalance in the muscles of the forearm and the pulley system of the elbow joint. So then it gets pulled out of alignment and I feel elbow pain. So I want to be able to balance those. And we can do that by working different grip positions and by doing all of our wrist exercises, our wrist warm-up flexibility stuff. We can isolate that with wrist curls in a supinated grip, in a neutral grip, in a pronated grip, and target different aspects. We can just do it with hanging, just pronated grip hanging, supinated grip hanging. That's going to help us build strength in those forearm muscles as well. Are we training those? Are we keeping them in balance? Or are we always doing supinated grip chin-ups? We've got to think about that just a little bit. Point I want to cover on structural balance is actually the bicep muscle itself. So we have the short head of the bicep, which just crosses the elbow joint, and we have the long head of the bicep that crosses both of the elbow and the shoulder joint. Now, we can get a structural imbalance between the short head and the long head, and this can also cause elbow pain. If I'm doing a lot of supinated grip work, palms up, so palms up chin-ups, palms up rows, palms up bicep curls, then I'm training a lot of the short head of the bicep, making it strong but not getting enough strength through maybe the long head of the bicep. If I'm doing a lot of pull-ups, a lot of pronated grip curls or rows, then it's more long head of the bicep and maybe I'm not getting enough strength in the short head. If I'm doing a lot of straight arm work, RTO ring support is more long head of the bicep. Levers, front levers, back levers are more long head of the bicep. Maybe I'm strengthening the long head of the bicep too much and I haven't done enough short head of the bicep work. So going back and looking at the program over the last sort of 12 weeks or longer, what have you been doing a lot of? What have you been missing out in the program? Do I need to change the next phase of training to strengthen the bicep head that I haven't been isolating or training? If that's the case in the program, let's say I've been doing a lot of supinated grip work and I've got elbow pain, I'm going to switch that up. So maybe I'm going to do neutral grip or pronated grip work. And in the program, I might be doing pronated grip pull-ups, neutral grip rows, and pronated grip curls because I've got elbow pain in the supinated grip. Over time, that's going to help strengthen the long head of the bicep and maybe the elbow pain will go away if that was the cause. In a normal program, if I haven't got elbow pain, do I really want to be doing pronated grip pull-ups, pronated grip rows, and pronated grip curls? I'm just going to strengthen more the long head of the bicep, and in reality, it's going to lead to elbow pain because I haven't balanced it out by training the short head of the bicep. So if I'm doing pronated grip pull-ups, then maybe I'm doing neutral grip rows or I'm doing supinated grip bicep curls. I'm trying to get a good balance across the bicep muscle by having variety within the training phase. In the next training phase, I might be doing neutral grip pull-ups, pronated grip rows, and supinated grip curls. I'm always thinking about the overall picture, the longevity and health of the elbow and how the training program, not just in one phase, but over the whole training program, how are we making sure we're keeping the structural balance in there and targeting all of the muscles to keep the joints happy and healthy. The structural balance doesn't stop there. We've also got to think about, okay, well, how does the upper arm muscle compare to the forearm muscle or the lower arm muscle? Not only are the pulleys running this way between the front and back of the forearm and the front and back of the bicep and tricep, but also they're running this way across the pulley system. So if I'm doing a heap of upper body bent arm work, pressing and pulling, but I'm not doing a lot of forearm work, then maybe I'm getting a structural imbalance there and pulling that joint out of alignment. So there's a lot going on in the elbow joint and there's a lot we have to consider. So in summary, when we're talking about structural balance, we're talking about the bicep and tricep, how they compare to each other. Can I straighten the elbow? Can I not straighten the elbow? We're talking about the bicep muscle itself, short head and long head. We're talking about the muscles of the forearm, front and back, okay? We're talking about the ratio of the bicep to the forearm, the tricep to the forearm. So that little pulley has got a lot of different connections going through it, and we've got to make sure that they're all balanced, or they're all getting worked and they're all staying strong, so that we don't pull the elbow joint out of alignment, which will lead to the elbow pain. So structural balance is something that's important. We can get quite technical on it and talk about all the different ratios with different movements, or we can just go, you know what? The program needs variety in it. I need to make sure I'm sticking to a particular exercise for 4 to 6 weeks, and in the next phase, I'm changing that exercise up in terms of grips. And also within the program, I'm not overtraining one particular grip, all right? And that will help you sort of to maintain a certain level of structural balance and hopefully prevent shoulder pain, elbow pain, wrist pain, and all those things that can come from an imbalance in those muscle groups. So we're going to have a look at your training history. What's led to the elbow pain? What movements have you been doing in the last 12 weeks, last 3 months that might cause this elbow pain? Have you been doing a lot of false grip work? Have you been doing everything in a supinated grip? Always doing chin-ups, always doing supinated grip, bicep curls, always doing supinated grip rows. Are you creating this structural imbalance because you're not targeting the different muscles of the upper arm and the different muscles of the lower arm? So we want to think about that. What's the ratio of your upper body pushing and upper body pulling exercises in the program that you've been following? Have you been doing a lot more push-ups and a lot more dips and a lot more handstand push-ups than you've been doing chin-ups and rows and things like that to balance out those movements? We want to be thinking about, okay, the balance of pushing and pulling. What about your straight arm work? Straight arm, let's call it front levers, let's call it planche, let's call it handstands, to bent arm work, chin-ups, rows, push-ups, all of these movements. What's the ratio there? Are we making sure that we're getting a good mix of these movements, or are we just constantly doing handstands all the time? What's the ratio of supinated grip, neutral grip, and pronated grip work that you've been doing, okay? Or even false grip. If you've been doing a lot of one and not hitting a mix of a lot of different grip angles, then you've got an issue there. You're probably going to be overtraining certain parts of the forearm and certain parts of the bicep. The grip that you use for curls will dictate which part of the bicep gets more activation, whether it's the shorter head or the longer head of the bicep, which is also important. What's the volume of training you've been doing? Have you been doing a lot of high rep stuff for a long time? Just pumping out lighter weight. Maybe it's you're good at push-ups and you can do 50 push-ups and you've been doing a lot of push-ups. You've been doing a lot of ring rows. You've been doing a lot of chin-ups. The volume is high. Compared to the intensity, have you been doing some weighted chin-ups, weighted push-ups, weighted dips, lower repetitions, okay, shorter times under tension, and just getting some variety in the training? A lot of high volume work for long periods of time could potentially lead to elbow pain or pain of any joint, really. High volume work is great for training the muscle, okay, muscle fibers, building hypertrophy, all this sort of stuff. But what about the connective tissue? What about the ligaments and the tendons? We're better off doing lower repetitions but more time under tension here. Slow movements, not fast movements. In your program, are you always working really fast? Are you ever doing any slow eccentric movements? Are you training to increase the strength of the connective tissue, or training just to build hypertrophy and bigger muscles? And then how long have you been doing that for? So we've got to think about quality of the movement, speed of the movement, volume of the movement. All this stuff comes into the program design. Frequency of training. How often are you training? Are you training and then allowing the body to rest and recover? Are you training every day and just not allowing the body to recover? We want to make sure we're including rest in the training program. We're not overtraining. We're applying enough stimulus for us to get stronger to move towards our goals, but we're also getting enough rest and recovery in there. If not, if you just continue to beat yourself up, of course, that's going to lead to injury. So these are things we need to think about in the training program. Before I talk about, okay, the rehabilitation and how to prevent elbow pain, the last little thing I want to say is equipment. What equipment are you using? If you're using the rings a lot and we're doing a lot of transition, a lot of muscle up work on the rings, a lot of false grip, stuff on the rings, this puts a lot of pressure on the elbow. We're also working through, we think about a ring chin up. It's maybe neutral into supinated, into pronated, into different positions that we're moving through. Can we avoid elbow pain there? If we're going through every possible scenario there, chances are that's causing elbow pain. So the rings can sometimes be to our detriment if we're always training on the rings and we're not doing a lot of other accessory work. Maybe it's some bar pull-ups, it's bar rows, maybe it's even some dumbbell work. Then we can put a lot of pressure on the elbow joint on the rings. So we want to be careful with the volume of work on the rings and think about other apparatus that we can train on the pull-up bar, on a barbell, in a rack for supine rows, on a more stable surface every now and again that allows us to put this consistent tension into the elbow with specific movements to help strengthen the connective tissue. The rings, very dynamic and awesome tool, probably the best tool there is in the kit to train up a body. But if we're using it too much and we're not building the strength that we need in the elbow joint, it is going to lead to elbow pain. So think about the equipment that we're using. If you're constantly using P-bars, so let's say if you're planche or let's say if you're handstands, you're always on P-bars, again, it's a lot of this radial and ulnar flexion and extension. What are you doing in this way for the wrist extension and flexion? So spend some time, even if it's just doing your push-ups, even if it's just doing your wrist warm-ups, making sure that you're working that. Maybe you have to include specific wrist extension and flexion with wrist curls to balance out all the work that you're doing on the P-bars all the time. So we've got to think about that as well. Body weight load versus external load. When we're working with our body weight all the time, we got to think about it. Even in a push-up, it's 60% of your body weight. In our dips, it's our whole body weight. In our chin-ups, it's our whole body weight. If you've got elbow pain, maybe you need to use less weight and just be able to go through the ranges of motion and gradually build the strength up again. So external loads like dumbbells, like a barbell, all these things, we can put less than our body weight on there, or we can find a weight that we can use that doesn't cause pain and allows us to move through a full range of motion. So sometimes we need to step back from the body weight training and just go to some external loads, some dumbbells or other tools to be able to go, okay, I need to build back the strength so then that I can go back to lifting my body weight again. So that's just a little bit on equipment and tools that we can use to overcome, elbow pain, or even sometimes prevent elbow pain. If you can't do a lot of exercises with full range of motion with your body weight, well, then you need to build strength with external loads to get to the point where you can, work that. Again, not working full range of motion, we talked about this at the start, can lead to elbow pain. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff I've talked about there, but it's important to consider all that stuff. I can't give you a solution to fix your elbow pain if you haven't thought about all the stuff I've covered, your training history, structural balance in the shoulder, the elbow joint, the wrist joint, all these sort of things. So that background information here now is going to help you sort of think, okay, moving forward, what do I need now to fix the elbow pain that I've got? One thing we want to think about is, okay, there's not a lot of muscle in the elbow joint itself. There's a lot of connective tissue here. The muscle is above and below. So if the pain is really in the elbow, when we're not feeling it more in the bicep or the tricep or the forearm, if it's deep in the elbow, well, then chances are it's got to do with connective tissue, the ligaments and tendons in the elbow. So a good way to strengthen these ligaments and tendons is with slow eccentric work. So I like to use, someone that's got elbow pain, I'd like to use the eccentric chin up, but I'm going to choose a grip that doesn't cause pain. Can they do a supinated one that doesn't cause pain? If they've been doing a lot of supinated work, well, maybe this is what's caused the pain and they can't do that anymore. What about a neutral grip? Does that cause pain? What about a pronated grip? Does that cause pain? Let's select a grip in the chin up or the pull up that you can use that won't cause pain, and it will allow you to do an eccentric repetition. If you can't yet do chin ups, well, then what about barbell rows? We put a row in there, it's a supine row. Can you pull up for one rep and then slowly go down? Again, finding a grip that you can use that doesn't cause pain. We might be doing something like 10, 15, 20 seconds eccentric, just one repetition, resting and then going again. And it's this time under tension, this slow movement that's helping to strengthen the connective tissue in the elbow. All right, so that's one of the tools I like to use. Shoulder stability. I'm going to come back to shoulder stability. If the shoulder's not stable, if the shoulder's not mobile, then the elbow joint's going to always have more force put into it, and that's going to lead to the pain. So I'm going to come back and say, are you doing your external rotator work? Are you doing your trap work, trap 2 and trap 3 work? Go back and look at the video I spoke about fixing your shoulder pain. If you're not working these movements in your program weekly, then chances are your shoulders are not strong and stable. So making sure of that. Fixing any flexibility issues in the wrists and shoulders. If you don't have good wrist flexibility and you're trying to do movements that require that, then you're going to have to work on the wrists so that you don't put more force into the elbow. Shoulder flexibility. If you can't straighten the arms above your head, if you can't straighten your arms in planche, if your elbows are always bent in your front lever, you've got work to do. You've got to figure out what I need to do to improve my shoulder strength and flexibility so I can keep the elbow joint locked. So I'm not going to cause the elbow pain or discomfort in that movement. We don't want to be putting this load into the elbow joint. We need to be able to go on the skeletal system and have the load more in the shoulder joint and be able to control those movements, okay? So we've got to look at your training, look at your technique, think about what is missing and why it's causing the elbow pain. Work on that. Shoulder flexibility, wrist flexibility, shoulder stability, shoulder strength, all the things that we've spoken about. Specific forearm strength, okay? Do I need to be working on my wrist curls? Supinated grip, pronated grip, neutral grip, all this wrist stuff to strengthen wrist. Even just hanging. Different variations of hanging can be really good for strengthening the forearm. It can also offer good structural balance for the shoulder. Passive hanging, active hanging. Working on technique. Am I performing the exercise correctly? Am I loading the shoulder before I'm loading the elbow? Understanding the technique of the movement. Full range of motion in your movements. These are all things, okay? So don't work through pain. Try to find some sort of eccentric chin up or row that you can do. Make sure you're doing the movement correctly, loading the shoulder, working on shoulder stability and shoulder strength, working on wrist flexibility, okay? Working on shoulder flexibility. These are all things that are going to help you overcome elbow pain, and you're going to need to piece together, what exactly they are from the material I've already shared, okay? Don't push through pain. If something's causing you pain, then we want to stop that and we want to try to find a variation that will allow you to move without pain. A little bit of pain is okay, but not too much pain, all right? So just be careful of that. It's something that we don't want to push through pain. Okay, so that's what I'm going to suggest for fixing the elbow. What about preventing? Okay, if you don't have elbow pain right now, but you're going to be doing a lot of gymnastics, bodyweight training, well, then chances are at some point in your training, you're going to experience elbow pain. I sometimes experience elbow pain. I feel it coming on. I feel it, okay, oh, geez, a bit of a niggle there. And then I'm going to add specific stuff. I'm thinking to myself, okay, what have I been missing from my training program? What can I be doing? Do I need more forearm work? Do I need more bicep or tricep work? Do I need more shoulder stability work? What's causing this elbow pain? And then I'm going to add that into my program. You want to be able to do the same. Understand, okay, what's missing? What do I need to put into the program? But also consistently training a little bit of everything. I need shoulder stability, okay? Every week in your training program, there should be some sort of shoulder external rotation work. There should be some sort of mid-trap work, and there should be some sort of lower trap work, okay? Trap 2 and trap 3 work, making sure that's always included in the program. My grip. Last phase, did I train more supinated stuff, more neutral stuff, more pronated stuff? What am I going to train this phase that's going to switch up that grip somehow and make sure I'm targeting different muscles and keeping the structural balance in the arms in my pushing and pulling exercises, okay? Thinking about the grip. Foundation movements. Am I training protraction, retraction, depression, elevation? Am I training all these key positions of the shoulder? Can I put that in my warm-up somehow? Can I be doing dip shrugs? Can I be doing scapular pull-ups? Can I be doing scapular rows? Can I be doing scapular push-ups? All these foundation things are critical to making sure we keep strong and healthy shoulders, and that helps prevent elbow pain further down the chain. Balancing movements. How many pushing movements am I doing? How many pulling movements am I doing? How many vertical push-pull? How many horizontal push-pull? How much straight arm stuff? Straight arm pressing, straight arm pulling? How much bent arm pulling, bent arm pressing? Am I including all this stuff in the program? Is there a little bit of it at least? Maybe I love handstands and all I want to do is handstands, but at the same time, I'm going to put in some tricep extensions and some bicep curls at the end of one day to make sure I'm getting in some elbow flexion and extension. Or I might do some push-ups and some rows in there. Just adding a little bit is all you need to keep the muscles and the elbow joint healthy. If I leave it out until I get shoulder pain or elbow pain, well then maybe I can't do handstands anymore. I've got to stop because of the pain, because I didn't include this stuff that I need to do. And now I'm going to walk away from handstands for 4 to 6 weeks while I do the push-ups and rows that I should have been doing. So it's including this stuff now to prevent the shoulder pain or the elbow pain or the injury from coming. Spoke about shoulder stability, the importance of shoulder stability, that work. Spoke about wrist flexibility. In your warm-ups, make sure you're stretching out the wrists. Try to work, sometimes handstands on the floor, sometimes handstands on the P-bars, thinking about all this sort of stuff. If you have to do isolation work on the wrists, put it in there. Being mindful of the training volume, how much volume you're doing, is the body recovering? Being mindful of the frequency of training. Am I getting rest days in there? Am I doing too much training? Am I training false grip multiple times a week and maybe my elbow's not ready for that just yet? So I have to back off and just train false grip once a week until I build enough strength so I don't get elbow pain. Where's my recovery time? All this sort of thing. Am I eating well? Am I sleeping well? Am I getting in the right nutrients? All the things that are going to help me recover, to grow stronger, to limit the chances of injury. Thanks for watching. I've covered a lot of information there, so I hope you found this useful. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them below and I will get back to you. I hope this has given you some ideas around what might be causing your elbow pain, what you can do to fix your elbow pain, and maybe what you need to be doing to prevent elbow pain in the future. Until next time, happy training.